Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here, and in today's video we are going to be talking about granaries and what their significance is, why and how they were used, and the possible spiritual implications as told by modern tribes. Might not seem like an exciting subject, but it's actually very interesting. We want to have a good idea and as best understanding we can of kind of the history of the ancient Southwest and Northwestern Mexico. Granaries are a big part of that. It's something that doesn't get talked about very much. First of all, I gotta say, with an online audience, you have a broad range of people. And when I say granary, people have gone online and said, you're saying it wrong, it's granary. And when I've said granary, people in the comments have said, you're saying it wrong, it's granary. Now, all the archaeologists I am affiliated with have always said granary, and looking it up online, it's claiming that that is the proper pronunciation. So if you say granary, it seems like it's doesn't really matter either way, which way you prefer. But if I say granary, I understand if you're saying it granary, that's going to be very grating to you. I want to acknowledge it, and I apologize ahead of time if that's the way you say it. But we're going to jump into this. To understand granaries, first of all, we have to jump back and say all humans as a species everywhere in the world, we are hunter-gatherers. The default setting of the modern human, Homo sapien, is a hunter-gatherer. We hunt animals, we gather plants. That's just the default setting. We like protein, we need some protein, so we got to do some hunting, and that was more viable, especially during the Ice Age, but plants also. Then humans become agrarian. Agrarian agriculture, that's where you switch and you start, instead of hunting, you start to ranch, and instead of gathering, you start to farm. Ranching and farming have different problems that come about. So if you're a rancher, so you're going to domesticate something, you're going to domesticate sheep, or you're going to domesticate camels or cattle, from wild oryx. Well, when you're doing that, now you have to stay with your herd, and your herd has to always move because they are going to overgraze an area. So you have to be nomadic. Maybe you were before, but even more so now. You move where the herd moves, and you have to guard them from other animals. You have a ready source of food always. There's always food right there, year-round. Doesn't matter. Summer, winter, boom. There's an animal that you can kill instead of having to hunt for it. But you also are now going to have to fight other people regionally for water rights and grazing rights. And that's where you have a lot of issues anciently that have spilled over today, where different people, this is our territory, this is our territory. Well, it's not really about territory. It was about grazing rights and water rights. And that's where you get the religious ideas of my deity figure promised this water area for me. No, they promised it for me. Because people normally aren't violent. But when you're having to defend yourself, how can you justify killing somebody else? Well, if you're like, well, my deity figure promised this water area for me, so I'm right to defend it to the point of death. It's kind of weird. So that's one of the problems that arises with agrarian culture, with agrarian ranching cultures. Now, agrarian farming cultures are different, because now you are investing heavily in a crop and you are domesticating this crop species and domesticating it to be more productive. So now you are tied to the land. So the bad thing is, somebody comes to attack you, you can't run. And you're investing everything into these crop fields. And these crop fields, you could have famine, you could have a big old drought, you could have insects come and eat them. And how do you battle bajillions of grasshoppers coming and eating your crops? You have other animals that want to come in and eat your crops. They're like, oh, hey, this smorgasbord's left out for me. So there's a lot of problems that come with being agrarian in the farming end of things. The plus is that you can invest in a structure. You're no longer nomadic. So you start to build houses that are more permanent. In the case of Southwest, we have adobe structures. They got bigger and bigger and bigger, more elaborate, until you have full-on cities like in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. It's just epic pueblos, huge, hundreds of people, thousands of people, hundreds of rooms, and all over the world. Farming agriculture is what led to cities, the ability to store food for later, plant food. So in the case of the Southwest Northwest, the thing that did everything was corn. Corn is the most magical plant, and if you're not aware, corn is grown more than any other crop on Earth, including rice. They might say, really? Because I think that, the rice intake, well, yeah, and here's the reason why. Because not only is it grown for humans, Dent corn is also grown for animal feed, from cattle to your dogs and cats. Look at the ingredients of your dog and cat food. It has corn in it. And they also use it to make biofuels. And they also use it, the byproducts of it, for things like bad stuff, like high fructose corn syrup. So it is a very versatile plant. It's not a plant of America, meaning North America. It is not. Now, you might think, what could be more American than like corn on the cob? Yeah, we're going to have corn on the cob and, boil it and have it for the 4th of July, buttered up, salt and pepper. And then, of course, in Mexico, the tradition, all my Mexican friends do the most amazing things cooking corn by the fire. They'll cook corn on the cob, roast it next to the coals, and they'll put all these flavorings and all these cool sauces on it, and it's to die for. It's wonderful. But corn comes from Mexico. And we're getting to the granaries, but you have to understand corn to understand granaries. So corn did not start off the way it looks today. Corn came from a plant called Teosinte. Now, Teosinte, I grow it every year in my yard. I've got some that I'm about to harvest right now. Teosinte, it smells, the leaves look just like corn leaves. It smells like corn, but the individual ear of Teosinte, it looks like a rattlesnake rattle. It's just ding, 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 side by side, and the kernels are rock hard. They're never soft. Now, you can pop it like popcorn. I've done it. It's kind of crazy. You can grind it up into a cornmeal. I guess it would be Teosinte meal. You can make tortillas out of it. No different than corn. Chemically, it's basically the same, but genetically it's different because we selectively bred it. We, meaning humans, we selectively bred it over the years, and it could, if there's evidence that it seems people in Mexico, central Mexico, started domesticating Teosinte as far back as potentially 7,000 years. It's pretty wild that it might be that far back, that they were harvesting it and then starting to work with it. That's pretty crazy. Now, we've selectively bred it into everything we have. Of course, your standard yellow corn, but there's all different kinds of corn. There's white corn. I raise almost exclusively the rainbow corn, the gem corn. Love it. It's incredible stuff. Tastes really good too. I'm actually going to do a video. I've never done this, but I'm going to try grinding it up and making it into tortillas and see what that's like. But the rainbow corn is great. Blue corn has a great cultural significance. There are tribes here in the Southwest that even to today, blue corn is where it's at. I love blue corn. I grow it every year, but I've never gotten it to grow well. It can grow big, old, huge, full ears, and every time I do it, it just kind of grows like, kind of like about the size of a Twinkie. But still, really cool. And this is made into, if you've ever had like blue tortilla chips, that's from that blue corn. Making anything out of it. One of the things is piqui bread. There is a tribe that makes piqui bread, and piqui it's very thin. It's kind of like a crepe. And piqui is ceremonial. It's a gift. It's like you make it up and you just have it, and just giving some of that to somebody. It can be stored, cooked. It can be stored that way, and you can eat it later on. And so it's kind of a great gift, a great offering to share with people. Piqui is very special. So all different types of corn, red corn, blue corn, rainbow corn. There's all these different amazing breeds of corn today, and we're still making new breeds of corn. But corn is great fresh. We eat it raw, we eat it cooked, we can it. You have to buy a can of corn, fine. But the real strength of corn is the fact that it can be dried and stay for, a decade. You can just dry it out. So you can dry it right on the stalk. That's what I usually do. Right now, it's September. My ears of corn are drying in my yard. I'm just letting them die, letting the corn die, and then let it just dry out on the stalk. It dries out better than pulling it off and drying it inside. You can also hang them up. You can do that as well, and I've done that as well, but they seem to dry better right on the stalk. Then you take them, about October, you take them and you store them. Now, we have homes that we try to keep insect and rodent proof today. In the old days, that was not the case. You would have things that could come in and eat your corn. But that's not the biggest worry. The biggest worry is other people stealing your corn. So what we see in the Southwest, we see granaries come about. Now, you want to store your corn, and you want to store it airtight would be great, but you want to store it insect-proof and especially rodent-proof. Because rodents getting in, not only will rodents get in, if they get into a granary and they start eating the corn, they're also going to pee all over it. Rodents, they mark everywhere they go. it's saturated with it's highly acidic, and that's going to ruin the corn as well. So even if they're only eating a couple of ears on top, they're going to destroy all of it because it's going to get saturated with that, and that's not good. So what we see in the Southwest, granaries typically would have, they'd usually have an opening on top or in the front, and they'd usually have one rock that was a slab to cover it. But it was also sealed up with adobe clay. So whether your door is in front or on the top, you got to seal it up because you don't want little things to get in there. Now, in the Southwest, there's a couple of peoples that I usually am spotlighting. One are in the kind of the Four Corners region, the Southwest region, and on into Mexico, we have, the Puebloan people, the Ancestral Puebloan people. That is not a native term. That is a catch-all. That is it's like, hey, if there's people who are building adobe structures that are from about like 300 BC to, about 1300 AD, that time period, and they're building adobe structures and they're growing corn, we kind of lump that in and say ancestral Puebloan people. Now, among those people, there's different tribes, there's different cultural traditions, and even within a tribe, there's different clans and different clan traditions. I acknowledge that 100%, but I'm just saying for understanding the architecture style, those people are the ancestral Puebloan people. It's kind of a clunky catch-all phrase. Then to the north, mostly in Utah and barely into the surrounding states, you have my region, which is the Fremont people. Now, the Fremont people are living in pit houses. Now, it's interesting to note that before about 180, the Fremonts were always living in pit houses. But before about 300 BC, the ancestral Puebloans also lived in pit houses. Pit house is a pretty simple structure. It's half above ground, half below ground, and you have a ladder. You get down on the top. It keeps you warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Both peoples have these, but around 300 BC, the ancestral Puebloans randomly, suddenly switched and started making adobe structures and started growing corn, which they were getting from Mexico. Okay, so they made the switch. They were more able to invest, and they invested heavily. They were all in. They still hunted, but they raised turkeys too, domesticated turkeys brought up from Mexico. But they invested. They were all in. They were an agrarian culture. A lot of times there was reverence given to water spirits and rain spirits because, again, we need the monsoon rains to water our crops. Well, so from Mexico, you have corn and agriculture coming up to the ancestral Puebloans, and then from the ancestral Puebloans up to the Fremont up north. Now, Mexico was 1,000% in on corn. They invented corn. The ancestral Puebloans were 100% in, maybe 99% in on the corn. It still did some hunting, but 99% in on the whole corn thing. And the Fremonts were like between 20 to 60% in on the whole corn thing. They were in a colder environment, didn't have as much sunlight in most of the regions, and so they started to graze corn, but they were still hunting and gathering, and they still needed to be somewhat mobile. And making a pit house is a lot of work, but it takes less work than making an adobe structure. So you have, again, Mexico, 1,000% in on agriculture and corn, ancestral Puebloan, 100% in, 99% in, 100% in, and Fremont significantly less, but still growing corn. I want to talk about granaries for both of these people. It's generally pretty solidly accepted that the granaries of the ancestral Puebloan peoples pretty cut and dry. They're small. If you see pictures, let me show you some video clips here. This is my favorite. This is in central Utah in the Bears Ears area. I don't think I'll name it, but it's easy to find out if you want, and it's not hard to get to. It's a nice little walk. I'm going to do a drone video of it here soon showing how close it is to the pueblo that ran it. But the interesting thing about this site, these granaries, they are about a mile away from the pueblo that operated them. Why are they far away? Why are they down in a little hidden canyon? Well, the assumption, and this is what the evidence sure looks like, is that this is strategic. Like, we're keeping our mass storage over here away from our main area. Now, we know, a lot of people aren't aware of this, there was times of violence in the Southwest, and there was times of great stress. There's like a 50, 70-year drought. And when things get dire, people get crazy. People do crazy things they wouldn't normally do when it's about survival. And it's about survival of your family, and you kind of default to a more negative setting. So we know there was violence. We've seen it. We've seen the evidence in the archaeological record. We know that there was violence. And we know to the bigger level, outside of Chaco, there was even slave trade and cannibalism. There was some dark stuff that happened. But your corn, if you are all in on agriculture, your corn, you must save that. And so keeping it away, if somebody might come into your village and thump you or give us tribute, if you can hide your corn elsewhere, then that seems to be wise. That might not be the reason why. It may have nothing to do with that. But looking at the evidence, it sure seems to suggest that this was a strategic place, that these were usually out of the way in a separate side canyon from the canyon you were living in. Why not store it right with you? We don't know. So that's the Ancestral Puebloan people. And again, Ancestral Puebloan granaries are typically, they're well built, and they're typically, the door is typically on the front. Sometimes it's on top, but usually it's on the front. And again, these were sealed up, and then you go in, get a bunch of corn, bring it out in the winter, use it. These are pretty cool. Okay, well, now the Fremont people were growing corn, but their corn was far more rare because they were not all in on agriculture. They were only partly in. They had their 1 foot in the water. And Fremont granaries are strange. I'm going to take a look at some images of some of these, and then we're going to take a drone and we're going to fly up to one here. So if you're looking at this, Fremont granaries, they're always in the most ridiculously inaccessible places, and some of these are near impossible to see. They're not big. These are tiny compared to Ancestral Puebloan sites. These granaries are in very hard to reach places where you might even need a rope to get into. Most of them, in fact, by today's standards, most of these you're only getting into if you have rappelling gear. And getting down into these, they're every one I've ever seen, the opening is on top, and there'll be a big stone, and there'll be some clay as well, some adobe clay. And it's all of these are so odd, they're so strange, and they're all roughly the same size, much smaller than the Puebloan ones. And we're going to get to the potential of a spiritual point of these in a minute. Now let's take a drone shot here. We're going to take a little drone video. This is one I recently went to, and we're going to go up here, and I could barely see it from the ground level. But flying the drone up there, it looked like there was sort of this dome-shaped thing, and I thought that was it because I was looking through my binoculars, but looking through the drone lens, it was kind of hard to see. But then I saw, nope, actually, I got to go down lower. And when you look at this is not very big. You can see off to the side, you can see there is the door that was on top, and you can also see spackled up on the side is clumps of dry adobe clay. So this is probably left here to go ahead and, recover it every time. You'll bring some water up with you, reconstitute the clay, and seal it up so the rodents don't get in there. So, panning out from this site, it's pretty incredible. And you can see this is not an easily accessible site. Well, the interesting thing is, when you talk about these granaries, again, the assumption is these are strategic, that it's like we want to make these inaccessible to people. There are some modern tribes who have said, no, you're coming to the wrong conclusion, archaeologists. These were prayer offerings. That's why they were so high up in the cliffs. They're being close to the deity spirits, and we're making an offering up there. Now, part of the argument for that is the fact that these granaries are so small compared to Ancestral Puebloan granaries. These are quite small. They're usually only like about this, like this wide and, like this tall. They're not very big. It's not going to store much corn. So it's like, well, we're just going to put some of our best corn up there for the gods, for the spirits, as an offering. Now, maybe that's the case. We don't know, because the problem is we don't know 100% who the ancestors of the Fremonts are. Their descendants. We don't know who their descendants are, nor do the descendants themselves. We've done DNA tests on different tribes all over, and what we see is because the Fremonts had such a broad range that when there were the droughts and that culture collapsed, a lot of them kind of assimilated into nearby tribes. So nearby tribes that are not at all closely related to the Fremonts themselves now carry on that DNA, totally unrelated tribes. So who has the answer on that? Well, nobody has a Fremont way of life. There are no modern tribes that live in a pit house. You know, you have tribes like the Dene, the Navajo, that will use structures like hogans, and kivas. You know, remember the kivas are half above, or sorry, the pit houses were half above ground, half below ground. When the ancestral Puebloans went from pit houses to pueblos, then the pit house became a kiva. And so the idea of an underground, that you come in from above with a ladder structure, still remained, and that usage evolved with time. So the interesting thing is we are not sure. We know that granaries were vital to storing corn. We 100% know this with the ancestral Puebloans. But with the Fremont, I will give you a couple arguments. On the argument side of these are prayer offerings, well, the argument is these are usually very high up, very inaccessible, and they're very small. They're not storing much corn, so maybe just kind of like an offering, just a little bit of our corn. The argument against that is the fact that, for example, at this site in 9 Mile Canyon, every village around has access to the view of this site. So you can see it from miles away. If somebody's climbing in to get to your corn, you would be able to see it. Also, we know that the Fremonts did not grow much corn, and so you would expect that your granary would be smaller, even if it was a functional granary, not a prayer offering. So for my understanding, my conclusion is the verdict's out. I want to understand all the perspectives that different people are bringing to the table. They certainly look very strategic to me. They very much look like we don't want people to get to these, including the ancestral Puebloan people. There's, you know, they seems like, hey, we're trying to kind of put it a canyon or two over from where we are living, which is, why would you do that? It's like we're trying to keep it out of the way. We want it to, you know, so that if somebody comes in and is trying to rob us or something or thump us, then, you know, we're keeping our corn safe, so we'll survive the winter. It's interesting. So granaries are everywhere in the Southwest, and a lot of them are small, and it's amazing to see them. They're little, they're pretty neat, but they're kind of magical because you think this help people survive. This was the most precious thing to people. You think about, what do we care about now? But we care about our technology, our stupid phones and our air conditioning, our fancy cars and stuff. And it's like, for these people, surviving the winter was entirely based on the ability to have grown corn, dried it out, and been able to store it. And it's interesting too, when I go to a lot of these sites, a lot of the ears of corn are quite small, and some of them are big. There were different strains of corn coming up, but the interesting thing is Mexico domesticated corn and got these big giant ears. Once those made it up north, the Puebloan people started to also change the direction and selectively breed the corn to more drought-resistant versions. And a lot of these ancestral Puebloans would do dry farming, which is where you are planting the corn and they're just kind of letting nature do its work. You're like, I planted you, go ahead. You're not watering it. You're just letting rain do its work. And so a lot of those ears are small. A lot of those ears of corn end up only being about as big as my thumb. But it was still usable. So we see a lot. When I go to these ruins, I see a wide range of sizes of corn. It's pretty cool to see. So I hope you enjoyed kind of this little whirlwind video talking about granaries. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the history of corn. If you haven't already, if you could subscribe to my channel, I very much appreciate it. It helps me to keep this up and going. Let me know your thoughts and your perspectives in the comments, because I like seeing all the different perspectives that everybody has. I'm learning from so many of you, and I hope you're learning from me as well. I just want this to be a place where people can come together and learn different things. But always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.